bum, bum, bum. Hey, everybody. Come on in here and make sure that you've got a fresh cup of warm beverage, because coffee with Scott Adams goes really well with a beverage. In fact, I'm going to take a sip right now, and if you'd like to enjoy your beverage even more than usual, try it at the same time. Simultaneous sip. Here we go. Oh. That's good. Simultaneous sipping, everybody. So, I don't know if you have seen the news. Well, that's not true. I know you've seen the news, because the people who follow my periscopes are not only unusually sexy, but well-informed as well. So you've all seen the news by now that the New York Times reported that back in June, the president, according to the New York Times, ordered Mueller, the special investigator, fired. But it didn't happen because, this is according to the New York Times, Donald, how do you pronounce it? Donald McGahn, Donald McGahn threatened to quit unless he was ordered, if he was ordered to do it. All right, so that was a bad explanation. Let me try that again. New York Times is reporting that White House counsel Donald McGahn threatened to quit when President Trump said, "Go tell Sessions, whoever, to fire Mueller." Now, so the report is that the president tried to fire Mueller, and the only thing that stopped it was this guy Donald McGahn. Now, I want to ask the New York Times, who do they think is the president of the United States? Because here's how I think things work. When the president of the United States says, go fire somebody, and a member of his staff says, if you tell me to do that, I'll quit, does the president of the United States say, I didn't know that I was outranked by my own employee, so I changed my mind? Does he do that? I don't think so. If you're the most famous firer in the world, I'm pretty sure that the president is the only person who gets to decide who the president fires. So New York Times is essentially reporting that the government is being run by this guy, Donald McGahn. Because when the president gives an order, apparently this guy can override it, according to the New York Times. Now, let me give you a different spin on this, which might be a little bit closer to the truth. Now, I wasn't in the room, so anything I say would obviously just be speculation. But what strikes you as more likely? This conversation or the following conversation? Conversation A, go fire Mueller. And then what's his name? Don McGahn says, nope, I'm not going to do it. And then the President of the United States, you do it. And McGahn says, no, I'll quit before I'll do that. And then the President of the United States says, damn it, I guess there's no way to fire this guy. Do you think that's what happened? Because that's sort of what the New York Times is reporting. That the president couldn't get his way firing his own employee. Not only could he not fire his own employee, he couldn't even tell one of his employees to tell somebody to fire him. You know, this guy Donald McGahn, he would just be a messenger. He literally wasn't even being asked to act like a lawyer. He was like, yeah, just tell this guy to fire this guy. He was just like, can you deliver a message? And so are we to believe that the President of the United States had been thwarted in his will by some guy who wouldn't deliver a message for him? Did the President of the United States have any other recourse to deliver a message to another person? I'm pretty sure he did. Such as every other single person he ever talks to. All right, Don wouldn't do it, but would you give a message to go fire this guy? Compare that scenario which has been reported, which appears ridiculous to me, to this scenario. Okay, what are we going to do about this Mueller guy? President of the United States says, well, could we fire him? What are our options here? Like, what are all the things that we could be doing or should be doing? Can we fire him? And then Don McGahn says, absolutely not. I'd quit before I did that. And then the president says, anybody else feel the same way? And other people say, yeah, it would be a big mistake. The reason I'd quit is because I couldn't do this to you, right? It would be a mistake to do this. And then the president says, okay, I have all your feedback now, so we won't do that. Doesn't that sound a little more likely that he just tested an idea in a private setting, and then people push back and they said, oh, okay. Shouldn't he be testing that? If you were the president of the United States, wouldn't you ask your lawyer, can we fire this guy who is taking the country on a witch hunt, according to the president, who, by the way, is the only person who knows for sure that it's a witch hunt? If it is a witch hunt, I'm assuming it is. So if the president, who actually knows if he did or did not collude with Russia, I assume he did not, he knows. So he's just asking, what are the options? Since I know I'm innocent, can I just fire the guy who's spending a lot of money and slowing down the country and slowing down my progress? And then the lawyer says, you could, legally you could, but it'd be such a bad idea. I'd quit before I'd let you do that. And then he says, anybody else feel the same? And then other people say, yeah, we feel about the same way. Don't do it. It would be a big mistake. And then the president says, oh, okay, it's a big mistake. Thanks for the input. If that's against the law, or if that's even, say less than against the law, if that's even a problem about how to hold a meeting, how to be a boss, how to be a leader, how to be a president, if that's a problem, I don't know what else is not a problem. So that's my reasonable filter on this. What else is happening today? Anything else happening today? Yeah, the thought police. Yeah, if the president can get in trouble for considering something and then not doing it because he was advised it would be a bad idea, what the hell, what can he do? I'm just looking at your responses now. Yeah, so the New York Times, the assumption in the reporting is that the president would want to fire Mueller because he's guilty. Why else would you fire Mueller unless you're guilty? Well, let me give you one other reason you would fire Mueller. You're not guilty. See, there are two reasons to fire Mueller. One is if you're guilty, and the other one is if you're not guilty. Two good reasons to fire Mueller. And they're both pretty good reasons. Steve Wynn, yeah. So, you know what's weird? Is there's no way that I know that I can't be credible when I tell you what I'm going to tell you next. I actually had on my list, sort of my mental list of who's going to be accused of a sexual impropriety next. Steve Wynn was actually at the top of my list. And it has nothing to do with me knowing anything about Steve Wynn. I know two things about him. He's a billionaire in Las Vegas. You put those two things together, and sooner or later, there's going to be a story coming out about some damn thing he did, right? Yeah, and there was some divorce going on, so money was at stake, etc. So I swear to God, I know I can't convince you of this, and so I won't try. But I did think that he was on some news report not too long ago, and I remember thinking to myself, well, this guy's going to be in the news again. And sure enough, that doesn't mean any of it's true, but I was pretty sure he would get accused of something. There's GPS disruption on the West Coast. Really? He knew about cameras. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and he's the head of the He's the head of fundraising, I guess, for the DNC. Yeah, that would be enough to put him on everybody's list. Somebody's asking for an update on Hawk Newsom. Hawk's actually putting together a very specific proposal that will be close to what legislation would look like for a specific problem that Black Lives Matter cares about. And I think it's a good issue, and as soon as he has that in a forum to share, I will share that with you. Because, I know where he's heading with this, and I have to say it's a good idea. No, Hawk is still Black Lives Matter, Greater New York. When is the Periscope with Naval? Well, we agreed to do it. We just have to be in the same place at the same time, so we'll just have to make that happen. The immigration proposal, is it dead? Well, so one of the things I tweeted is there are very few situations where you would want to use the, quote, nuclear option. For those who don't know, and fact check me if I'm wrong on any of the details here, the nuclear option is what Congress refers to as a bare majority, a 51% majority, or 50% if you count Pence, and as opposed to a supermajority of 60% of the people on the same side. Now, the current rules, as I understand them, is it the rules of the Senate only, are that you've got to have a 60% supermajority for budget stuff. And since part of the immigration plan is a lot of money for the wall, it's a budget question, and therefore you would need 60% of the Senate to pass it. Now, what they can do in the Senate also, since Republicans have a majority, is they can simply vote to change that rule. But if they do, it's changed for everything else as well. It sets a precedent. Because the 60% is sort of a practical solution that nobody loves, but nobody wants to change. But there might be it's to stop the filibuster. But there might be one situation where using the nuclear option makes sense for both sides. Right? So that's the tough thing. If you use the nuclear option, almost by definition, it's only going to be good for one side and bad for the other. But the president's immigration proposal is a weird duck because he was so generous in terms of offering more people a path to citizenship than even the Democrats were asking. And what he was asking in return are things which have substantial, I think, strong majority favorability in the general public. So if you give the Democrats more than they've asked so far, and you also only ask in return things which are popular by more than, let's say, 60% of the public, in that one situation, if you were to use the nuclear option, it would create a precedent, but it would be a narrow precedent. It would be passing legislation that 60% of the country wanted you to do. That's very different from using the nuclear option to get something that, maybe 45 or 50% of the country wants. By the time you get around 60%, that means 50% more people want you to do it than don't of the general population. So I would at least, I'm no expert on, the ways of government, but I would say that we should not treat this like every other situation. If my assumption is true that the president's proposal is unusually popular, and that the Democrats as a party are opposing it for just political reasons, not because it's what their public wants, that would be the one time that you could say to yourself, yeah, I hate changing this nuclear option thing, but if you're going to do it to give the people what they want, both parties, that might be the one time to do it. Yeah, but it is a bad precedent. So I think people who are smarter than I am need to decide whether that trade-off makes sense. Did I hear about a Night of Freedom? I did. I heard it was a good party. Do a podcast with Jordan Peterson. I don't know why. I think a podcast with Jordan Peterson and me would actually be not as interesting as you think. And the reason would be we wouldn't disagree on anything. If we did, it wouldn't be on anything important. What I've heard from him so far tells me I would just sit there and say, oh, okay, I agree with that. And he would sit there and say, yeah, I would have worded it differently, but that's the same thing I would have said. You did see that, let's see, there was Ben Shapiro, I saw this bit of his show on a clip yesterday. He was saying the same thing I was saying, but I believe he's a Harvard-trained lawyer. So he's a little smarter than I am in that area for sure. A lot of other areas apparently. But he said what I did, which is the president probably was smart to say, I will absolutely testify under oath, and then let his lawyers talk him out of it. By the way, I only just now put this together, so bear with me while I tie together two stories that are actually kind of funny. So we're watching the New York Times report. I can't believe I only just thought of this. You're going to laugh when you hear it. So as I mentioned earlier, the report from the New York Times is that the White House counsel, in other words, a lawyer working for the president, told him not to fire Mueller, and that was good enough, and he took that advice and didn't do it. At the same time, the president is saying, I will totally testify to Mueller unless, wait for it, unless my lawyer tells me not to do it. So the news story is that his lawyer told him not to fire Mueller, and he didn't do it. And now he's saying, I sure want to talk to that, I sure want to be interviewed by Mueller. Please interview me. I will go on, I'm going to be on, I'll be under oath. I can't wait. Put me in, coach. Let me testify. As long as my lawyer's okay with it. Because as the New York Times has reported, when my lawyer tells me to do something, I do it. People always accuse me, and rightly so, by the way, accuse me of being, too much in the bag or twisting things too much to make it in the president's favor. I don't do that intentionally. I promise you I don't do it intentionally. And you've seen plenty of times I've disagreed with things you've done. You've seen times that I've said that wasn't the best way to go about something. And I don't think that what I'm explaining now about the two lawyer situations is any kind of intentional 3D chess. It just happens to be the situation. The situation is that the top news story is about Trump taking advice from a lawyer to do something that he was not inclined to do, according to the story. At the same time, he's set them up by saying, yeah, totally, put me in. I want to testify. I'm so innocent. I'll testify under oath. I'm no Hillary Clinton. She didn't do it under oath. I'll do it under oath. Unless my lawyer tells me not to. So, I would not expect to see President Trump testify under oath. It's possible, because if there's anything that we know about this president, is that he's unpredictable. For most of you. He's a little more predictable for me, maybe, but only on the margins. So I wouldn't expect him to testify. Not when his lawyer tells him not to. It's like a non-story within a non-story. You're right. It's nested non-stories. Well, it's like, or is it a triple nested non-story? What public figures would benefit from receiving my book in the mail? Oh, that's a good question. Well, obviously, every Democrat would benefit, because I don't think they still don't know what's going on here. So maybe they'd learn something. Yeah, I'd have to think about that. I think it's applicable to pretty much everybody. We're talking about my book, Win Bigly. All right, what else is going on? Let me look at the headlines today. Let's see. So the report from Davos is that the president did a good job, right? Shares of Wynn Resorts have plunged more than 10%. Now, I do not give investment advice, but I would ask you the following question. What is the connection between Wynn Resorts, the business, and this little story about Steve Wynn being accused by women of stuff? Are we to believe that business at his resort will go down? So, I am not giving you investment advice, right? Let me say this as clearly as possible. This is not investment advice. So let's put this in the form of a prediction as opposed to investment advice. Don't invest based on me, okay? One of the things that surprised people about President Trump's resistance to these rumors, everything from Stormy Daniels to pussy grabbing to everything else. People keep saying, why is it that Trump is the one person who doesn't get taken down by the rumors that are taking down everyone else? And the reason is it was already baked in, because nobody was surprised. When he ran for president, 100% of the people who said it, who watched him said, well, we're going to hear some interesting stories now. And so if you supported him, you supported the president, or candidate Trump, you supported him knowing this was in his past, right? You knew that there must be stuff like that, and you probably know there's more stuff like that that's going to trickle out, and you've already decided. Now let's look at Steve Wynn. He's a billionaire casino owner who spends a lot of time in Vegas. Tell me you thought he had never done anything inappropriate with a woman. Is there anybody who thought that? Because, and by the way, I don't know if he did, but I don't think anybody suspects that a billionaire casino mogul is having a, ordinary vanilla life, goes home to his wife at 5 o'clock. I don't think so. I don't think anybody, somebody says I did, I don't think anybody thought that a billionaire casino mogul was not leading, let's say, an interesting life, to take the judgment out of it, an interesting life. It is Vegas, after all. It's literally Sin City, as somebody's saying. So if you were going to predict, again, this is not investment advice, but my assumption is that the business Wynn hotels are going to have no effect from this. Let me tell you something else, because I have stayed fairly recently. I've stayed at the Wynn hotels, and I've stayed at the Encore and the Wynn. And let me tell you something else about those two hotels. They're kind of the best hotels in Vegas. There might be a better one, but I'm not aware of one. And I think that's a general belief that the business itself is really, really well run. it's a strong business. So if you take the fact that the business itself is super strong, and it's just the best place in Vegas, and that didn't change, and the fact that all of any assumptions about a billionaire casino mogul are going to be not too far from anything you hear in the news, whether they're true or false, you figure he's had an interesting life, you know what I mean? So I don't think that stock is going to stay low. It seems like a lot of people probably made a lot of money or will make a lot of money on that. Not investment advice. If you take this as, well, don't take it as investment advice. Take it as a prediction, because that's what I do here. I like to predict based on the persuasion filter. The persuasion filter says that if this guy had been let's say a Baptist minister, well, maybe his business would go down based on a story like this. But if you have a casino in Sin City, I don't think anybody's going to care, right? Yeah, his Macau resorts will be fine, somebody's saying. So prediction is that unless there was some other problem with the stock that I don't know about, if that's the only reason it went down, that was probably an overreaction. We'll see. Do you subconsciously read some of these comments while talking? I don't think it's subconscious. I'm reading them while I'm talking. Yeah, I'm usually just looking for keywords if I'm talking at the same time. You can't literally read and talk and read and think at the same time. Everybody's going to take their tax cut and go to Vegas. Well, maybe not. Do I consciously register your names? Your names show up in a lighter text. It actually takes some concentrating to focus in and see them. Yeah, we're done with Wynn. But I love the name. His name is Wynn. Can you think of a better name for a casino mogul than Wynn? That's just perfect. People predicting a 10-year market crash. I also predict that the stock market will go down. You know why I predict that? Because the stock market always goes down eventually. The way of the stock market is that it overruns and then it pulls back. Have we overrun? I don't know. We're at least close to it. So we either have overrun or we're close to it. So is there, what are the odds that the stock market will pull back? I'd say good, in the next 3 years, pretty good. The odds of a 10% pullback in the next 3 years, pretty good. But that'll be a pullback from whatever level it is by then. It doesn't mean it will be lower than it is now. Scott, would you ever wear a toupee? Well, I don't think a toupee would work in my case because, what's the point of wearing a toupee if everyone knows you're bald? I think if you're a movie person, maybe it makes sense. I don't think it makes sense in my case. One of the best things that ever happened in society, I know this didn't affect most of you, but I don't remember when it was. It was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or whatever. There was a time when the sort of shaved head look became fairly popular even among, white guys. I think black athletes especially, had the shaved head look probably earlier than most people. Was it Michael Jordan who made that popular? But luckily that got popular just when I needed it the most. Oh yeah, Moby, Telly Savalas. Yeah. So somebody's saying my girlfriend somebody says their girlfriend yelled at them for listening to my Periscope. If it would help, turn up the sound on your Periscope and let me send a message to your girlfriend. So the rest of you just be quiet for a moment. I've got a message for the girlfriend of the gentleman whose girlfriend says that she shouldn't be listening to my periscopes. All right, this is just for her. Hey, girlfriend, it's okay. Let him listen to the periscopes. He's learning valuable things. And by the way, he might want a better girlfriend if you don't like my periscopes. Even if everything else about you is perfect, you're beautiful and smart and kind. That's not enough. You have to also like my periscopes, or you have no chance together in the future. So, wise up and at least pretend to like my periscopes. Otherwise, you have no future with a man who is clearly curious and smart and well-informed. Also, probably weirdly sexy. All right. Now back to the rest of you. That message was just for the girlfriend. Twitter stopped alerting you when I'm live. We will not be defeated by bad alerts. Somebody thinks you joined a cult. Luckily, my wife likes you too. Well, I was going to make a terrible joke there, but I'm not gonna. Your wife asks, who is Scott Adams every time I listen. I'm not sure that my periscopes are something you should be listening to while someone else is in the room if they don't like it. It seems like it would be terribly annoying to listen to any periscope if somebody else didn't want to hear it in the same room. All right. I saw a suggestion go by to drink to the tears of bad alerts. So if you're not getting alerts on your phone or device about my periscope, well, to hell with those alerts. We don't need no stinking alerts. Let us raise our mugs, our glasses, our vessels full of liquids, and simultaneously drink to not needing alerts. Oh. All right, there we go. Your husband, somebody said their husband was surprised that you knew who I am. All right. Trump had some interesting stuff to say about Netanyahu. I don't know what that was. I don't see anything on CNN. CNN doesn't have that Netanyahu story, but they do have porn star's friend speaks out on Trump. Well, that's news. They also have dad saw his son's socks in an ambulance. The wait is over for Caroline Wozniacki. So they're covering the big stories today. Although I like all those stories, so I shouldn't complain. Davos. So Davos was just a big success, right? You might have seen the clip of the gentleman saying how clever Trump was when he talked about America first at Davos. The way he framed it was, he said that he was a magnate, he was a rich guy like the people who were in the room talking to him, and that he was working for the betterment of his country, sort of giving back, if you will, and that those magnates should be working for the good of their country because, their country produced them. America produced Trump, and he's giving back. And whoever was talking, I wish I could quote him and reference him properly, but he said it was very clever to reframe it that way, as you rich people better get working for your countries the way I'm working for my country. That's really, really good. Okay, I wish I'd heard it live. I haven't seen the clip. If somebody has a clip of Trump saying that, I would love to hear his actual wording, because that framing of, this country made me a billionaire, I'm working to help the people who are not billionaires, and you other rich people, you damn well better be helping your countries because they made you rich, is great. I mean, as framing goes, that's as good as you can frickin' get, right? Is the Stormy Daniels story even remotely credible? It's better than credible. It's irrelevant. The only thing better than credible is irrelevant when it comes to this specific situation. Whether or not the Stormy Daniels story is true, half true, or completely false, it's going to have exactly the same impact. People are going to say, he had sex with a porn star. So, look how far we've come. Look how much the Republican Party has turned from a sort of I will judge you party. Have you noticed that when maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the Republican Party was sort of that moral majority party, and they were judging you. They were judging themselves too, but they were judging you. Like, all right, you're a sinner, that's bad, you can't work for me because you've been divorced, you're gay, whatever. But the moral majority was sort of the judgy part of the world. That seems to be, is it gone, or they're just not talking anymore? It's as close as you can get to gone. Now, is that good or bad? Well, look at the success of the Republican Party. I would say that the Republicans are successful in large part because what Trump brought to the job was no more of that stuff. In other words, by being the label for the Republicans at the moment, the idea of Republicans judging other people about their personal choices just looks ridiculous. And either because he's persuaded them or it would just be embarrassing to talk about it. If you think about it, do you remember when Republicans were sort of anti-gay? That's just gone, right? Oops. My TV just came on. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't plenty of Republicans and conservatives who have, anti-gay feelings. I'm sure they still exist. But the party, in terms of what they stand for and what they care about, what their priorities are, gay isn't even on the screen. Because, if your standard bearer is Trump, you're just not going to be picking on other people's lifestyle choices. It just doesn't make sense anymore. And it also doesn't feel like you need to, right? Because you're watching Trump right before your eyes. Let's say you're a moral majority type, not doing any of the things in his personal life. Well, let me not make that an absolute. Doing things in his personal life, allegedly, that you would greatly disagree with, but at the same time, he's doing a good job. So now we can separate the job of being president from the role model part. And it feels like we've grown up a little bit. I always thought it was a little infantile to say that the president needed to be our role models. Our role models? Do we need a role model? Do we adults who are educated, not all of us, but do adults need the president to be their role model? Like, who needs that? And so one of the things that Trump does so well is he looks at, the world of things that people care about, and he says, this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing that you all care about, they don't matter. I'm just going to ignore them, right? Remember political correctness? You thought it was important. How could you possibly get elected president unless you are politically correct? And that, certainly, you must certainly have a moral past life to become a Republican candidate. All these things that people assumed were very important, they were not. Do you think that President Trump, then candidate Trump, knew that these things would not be as important as we thought they would be? I think he did, because he said it right off the bat. He said, political correctness needs to go away, and he ran on that platform. So obviously he was all in on political correctness not being powerful anymore. He simply took its power away. Now, it still had a lot of power because the attackers still use it against him. But it certainly wasn't an obstacle to becoming president, obviously. Character doesn't make the man. We don't care about the man. We care about the job. You know, I think people are treating the president as an employee, in some sense. He's both a leader and an employee. It's a weird job being president. But, you don't care if your plumber goes to a different church. You don't care if you're the guy who mows your lawn. You don't care if he cheated on his wife. I mean, you might care, but it's not going to stop you from having him mow your lawn. You know what? I think I'd like to ask that we stop obsessing about anything that happened more than 20 years ago. Let me offer what I'll call let me call this the Adams law of let's see, what would I call it? Recency? The Adams law of recency. That within politics, if somebody did something more than 20 years ago, it just doesn't count. Because everything changes, right? Look how much life changed just in the past year. You know, look at how attitudes changed toward this whole Me Too thing. You know, 2018 doesn't even look like 2017 anymore. It looks like it's almost a different culture, just 1 year. So when you're looking at anything from the Clintons did these things we hate 20 years ago, sure they did, but they're not running for office, and it was 20 years ago, and nobody can forgive it because it's 20 years ago. You don't have to, but you can discount it. You can just discount it as less important than basically everything that's happening this year. So if you were to take, priorities, there's everything happening now, and then there's this little crap that happened 20 years ago that we shouldn't allow to have an impact on our current thinking and our current actions. Now, I apply this consistently because during the elections, people were saying, Hillary Clinton 30 years ago, did this sketchy thing, or said a racially insensitive thing 25 years ago, etc., or defended her husband 20 plus years ago, etc. I always, if you've been watching me, you never saw me get on her about any of those things, if they were more than 20 years ago. So internally, I've been using the 20-year rule. And so I use it when I look at Trump. So his past deeds more than 20 years ago, I don't count. Because we are not really the same people we were 20 years ago. If the point of life, and I would argue that this is, an important element of life, maybe not the point, but we're all trying to go from being a baby when we're born, where we have no skills, no character, no accomplishments, no nothing. All right, you're born with no character, no nothing, just a little DNA. And your whole life story should be trying to become the better version of yourself. So if you're doing a good job, in other words, if you're doing the best a person can do, you're starting from having nothing going for you to being a good person as much as you can be. So if you go back 20 years in anyone's life, you should find a worse version of them. So let me say that again. For anybody, if you take anybody, politician or non-politician, and you compare them today with their own self, is that the right grammar? With their own self, 20 years ago, that 20 years ago standard should look bad. If you've done everything right, your 20 years ago person is an asshole compared to today. Now, part of that is because you got better, right? You mastered some of your demons. You learned how to be a better person. You found role models in your life. You emulated them. You took care of your own needs and maybe your family too, so that you don't need to be so selfish. You're not as tempted to do bad things, for example. Somebody said if I met my 20 years ago self, I'd punch him. And I have to think that's going to be true for a lot of us. You know, I would certainly say if you judge me by my 20 years ago self, I'd say, well, I wouldn't mind being younger and be able to run farther or whatever, but I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be my 20 year ago character. That wasn't good enough even by my own standards. Why would I ask you to accept it? So I would ask everybody to apply the Adams rule of recency to politics. If you're telling me that Hillary Clinton more than 20 years ago hugged or liked Bob Byrd, and that, more than, 40 or 50 years ago, Bob Byrd was literally in the KKK, I'd say to you, my God, that sounds horrible. Don't care. Neither of them, well, one of them's dead, I think, but neither of them are that person. They're just not that person anymore. And I will apply this to, Republicans, Democrats, and I'll apply it to you. It's the standard I will apply to you. All right? So it's not just political. I'll apply the same standard to all of you. If it happened 20 years ago, you're not that person. Almost every molecule of your body has been recycled by then. All right, that's the Adams rule of recency. 20 years is all we care about. Somebody's asking me, am I going to set up the Patreon account? Actually, I did. So I do have a Patreon account. I have to admit, I've been hesitant to promote it because it doesn't feel that comfortable. But donations, micro donations are coming in. Most of the donations are, $1, $2, that sort of thing. But there are a lot of them. And there are enough of them to fund transferring these periscopes into audio, so I'm working on that. It turns out it's way more complicated than it should be, but I'm working through the options right now. Patreon isn't part of your brand, correct? Yeah, Patreon works a little bit against my brand, but here's the benefit of Patreon. One of the things that probably, this is an assumption that you can, I'll test with you right here, so tell me if you disagree with this. One of the things that probably makes this Periscope popular is that that nobody's paying me. There are no corporate sponsors. The minute I had a corporate sponsor for this, I couldn't do it the way I'm doing it. It wouldn't be unfiltered. And even if I thought I could be unfiltered, and even if my sponsor said, no, even though we're sponsoring you, we want you to be you. Just do you. That's why we're sponsoring you. Don't think about our brand. Just do what you're doing, and we'll just keep sponsoring you. That doesn't really work. Because let's say, for example, this would never happen, so this is not a real example. But let's say, Walmart wanted to sponsor me. And let's say they came in and they said, look, the only reason we're sponsoring you is because we know you're just going to do whatever you do. Don't do anything differently because of us. And then I say, great. Yeah, I'm free. I've got Walmart's sponsorship, and they're saying I can do whatever I want. I'm not going to go do whatever I want. I'm not wired that way. If Walmart were giving me a lot of money to, say, sponsor what I'm doing on Periscope, I would be thinking about them when I decided how provocative to be. It would completely control how I do things, and it wouldn't be as good. So Patreon gives somebody like me, who already has money, it gives me a incentive to do this, and also, some resources to expand it in ways I just wouldn't bother. So, I can expand it to podcasts, and maybe some indexing and stuff. Maybe get some guests, perhaps get an engineer at some point. Actually, if I got enough Patreon donations, I would probably hire a full-time engineer to set up my periscopes and stuff. So the Patreon donations go toward making this an independent product. Somebody says they want to buy WenHub tokens. We're pretty close to having that done. We had a little hiccup in our production because life got in the way. But pretty soon the WenHub app called Interface will be out. And I don't know how many apps like this exist, but the new app that my startup is working on is going to be, I'm gonna call it crypto native. Crypto native meaning that the app itself, you're going to have a crypto wallet to use. So in other words, we're not going to be operating on credit cards and regular money in the usual way. That's of course how you'll have to get your coins in the first place. But behind the scenes, it's all a crypto blockchain kind of a system, and you will need a wallet. By the way, how many of you know how to set up let me do a public service here. Let me tell you something that if you have not looked into Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto stuff, and you're all confused and you're saying, but I'd like somebody to give me some cryptocurrency, what would it take? And the answer is it's really easy. You go to Coinbase, for example, and you just fill in a form that says, give me a wallet, it's free. And your wallet is really just a string of characters that is unique to you. That's it. So your wallet is just a string of characters that is given to you for free, and it takes about a minute to just put in your information, who you are, and then it gives it to you, and that's your wallet. So if you want a crypto wallet, it takes about 1 minute. Get a string of characters, don't lose it, copy and paste it, and then you got a wallet. Well, you don't want to, So there's both a password and then there's, your wallet. Those are different things. Don't forget either of those things. So keep them somewhere where other people can't get them. The problem is if somebody sees it or gets it, they can get into it. So go to Coinbase.com and you'll see a link there for creating your own wallet. It's free. There's no catches. Once you have your wallet, you're good to go. Use hardware wallets. I have to learn more about hardware wallets. It feels like there would be a downside to that too. I don't know what it is, but is it a social security number? I don't know, actually. I don't know if that's the only thing they want. The weird thing is I haven't done it. Quark from Deep Space Nine would love me. Unfortunately, I know exactly what you mean there. That's kind of funny. How do you pay taxes on Bitcoin? You'd have to self-report. So you would, owning a Bitcoin, I don't believe is a taxable event. Well, that's a good question. If your Bitcoins go up in value, do you have to pay taxes like it's an investment? Consult your accountant. I don't know the answer to that. Oh, so you do. Gosh, I don't know how you'd account for that. You don't today. 15% capital gains when you sell it. Only if you sell. Only if you sell, not if you spend. Interesting. We're getting different opinions here. It might depend on your country too as well. All right, I'm going to end here. Do I have a P.O. box? I do not. So assume I don't know anything about crypto accounting, so don't take any advice from me on that score. And I will talk to you